They were regarded as little above the level of brutes, and in some cases were destroyed like vermin. Here is an instance. A squatter whose station was surrounded by blacks, whom he suspected to be hostile, and from whom he feared an attack, parleyed with them from his house door. He told them it was Christmas time, a time at which all men, black or white, feasted, that there were flour, sugar plums, good things in plenty in the store, and that he would make for them such a pudding as they had never dreamed of, a great pudding of which all might eat and be filled. The blacks listened and were lost. The pudding was made and distributed. Next morning there was howling in the camp, for it had been sweetened with sugar and arsenic. The white man's spirit was right, but his method was wrong. His spirit was the spirit which the civilized white has always exhibited toward the savage, but the use of poison was a departure from custom. True, it was merely a technical departure, not a real one. Still, it was a departure and therefore a mistake in my opinion. It was better, kinder, swifter, and much more humane than a number of the methods which have been sanctified by custom, but that does not justify its employment. That is, it does not wholly justify it. Its unusual nature makes it stand out and attract an amount of attention, which it is not entitled to. It takes hold upon morbid imaginations, and they work it up into a sort of exhibition of cruelty. And this smirches the good name of our civilization, whereas one of the old harsher methods would have had no such effect, because usage has made those methods familiar to us and innocent. In many countries, we have chained the savage and starved him to death. And this we do not care for, because custom has inured us to it. Yet a quick death by poison is loving kindness to it. In many countries, we have burned the savage at the stake, and this we do not care for, because custom has inured us to it. Yet a quick death is loving kindness to it. In more than one country, we have hunted the savage and his little children and their mother with dogs and guns through the woods and swamps for an afternoon's sport, and filled the region with happy laughter over their sprawling and stumbling flight, and their wild supplications for mercy. But this method we do not mind, because custom has inured us to it. Yet a quick death by poison is loving kindness to it. In many countries we have taken the savage's land from him, and made him our slave, and lashed him every day, and broken his pride, and made death his only friend, and overworked him till he dropped in his tracks. And this we do not care for, because custom has inured us to it. Yet a quick death by poison is loving kindness to it. In the Matebleland today, why, there we are confining ourselves to sanctified custom. We Rhodes bait millionaires in South Africa and dukes in London. And nobody cares, because we are used to the old holy customs, and all we ask is that no notice, inviting new ones, shall be intruded upon the attention of our comfortable consciences. Mrs. Preed says of the poisoner, that squatter deserves to have his name handed down to the contempt of posterity. I am sorry to hear her say that. I myself blame him for one thing, and severely, but I stop there. I blame him for the indiscretion of introducing a novelty which was calculated to attract attention to our civilization. There was no occasion to do that. It was his duty, and it is every loyal man's duty to protect that heritage in every way he can, and the best way to do that is to attract attention elsewhere. The squatter's judgment was bad, that is plain, but his heart was right. He is almost the only pioneering representative of civilization in history who has risen above the prejudices of his caste and his heredity and tried to introduce the element of mercy into the superior race's dealings with the savage. His name is lost, and it is a pity, for it deserves to be handed down to posterity with homage and reverence. This paragraph is from a London journal. To learn what France is doing to spread the blessings of civilization in her distant dependencies, we may turn with advantage to New Caledonia. With a view to attracting free settlers to that penal colony, M. Faylet, the governor, forcibly expropriated the Kanaka cultivators from the best of their plantations, with a derisory compensation, in spite of the protests of the Council General of the island. Such immigrants as could be induced to cross the seas thus found themselves in possession of thousands of coffee, cocoa, banana, and breadfruit trees, the raising of which had cost the wretched natives years of toil, whilst the latter had a few 5-franc pieces to spend in the liquor stores of Noumea. You observe the combination? It is robbery, humiliation, and slow murder, through poverty and the white man's whiskey. The savage's gentle friend, the savage's noble friend, the only magnanimous and unselfish friend the savage has ever had, was not there with the merciful, swift release of his poisoned pudding. There are many humorous things in the world, among them the white man's notion that he is less savage than the other savages. See chapter on Tasmania, post. Chapter 22. Nothing is so ignorant as a man's left hand, except a lady's watch. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. You notice that Mrs. Preed knows her art. She can place a thing before you so that you can see it. She is not alone in that. Australia is fertile in writers whose books are faithful mirrors of the life of the country and of its history. The materials were surprisingly rich, both in quality and in mass, and Marcus Clarke, Ralph Boldrewood, Gordon, Kendall, and the others have built out of them a brilliant and vigorous literature, and one which must endure. Materials, there is no end to them. Why a literature might be made out of the Aboriginal all by himself, his character and ways are so freckled with varieties. Varieties not staled by familiarity, but new to us. You do not need to invent any picturesquenesses. Whatever you want in that line he can furnish you, and they will not be fancies and doubtful, but realities and authentic. In his history, as preserved by the white man's official records, he is everything, everything that a human creature can be. He covers the entire ground. He is a coward, there are 1,000 facts to prove it. He is brave, there are 1,000 facts to prove it. He is treacherous, oh, beyond imagination. He is faithful, loyal, true. The white man's records supply you with a harvest of instances of it that are noble, worshipful, and pathetically beautiful. He kills the starving stranger who comes begging for food and shelter, there is proof of it. He succors and feeds and guides to safety today, the lost stranger who fired on him only yesterday, there is proof of it. He takes his reluctant bride by force, he courts her with a club, then loves her faithfully through a long life, it is of record. He gathers to himself another wife by the same processes, beats and bangs her as a daily diversion, and by lays down his life in defending her from some outside harm. It is of record. He will face 100 hostiles to rescue one of his children, and will kill another of his children because the family is large enough without it. His delicate stomach turns at certain details of the white man's food, but he likes overripe fish and braised dog and cat and rat, and will eat his own uncle with relish. He is a sociable animal, yet he turns aside and hides behind his shield when his mother-in-law goes by. He is childishly afraid of ghosts and other trivialities that menace his soul, but dread of physical pain is a weakness which he is not acquainted with. He knows all the great and many of the little constellations, and has names for them. He has a symbol writing by means of which he can convey messages far and wide among the tribes. He has a correct eye for form and expression, and draws a good picture. He can track a fugitive by delicate traces which the white man's eye cannot discern, and by methods which the finest white intelligence cannot master. He makes a missile which science itself cannot duplicate without the model, if with it, a missile whose secret baffled and defeated the searchings and theorizings of the white mathematicians for 70 years. And by an art all his own, he performs miracles with it which the white man cannot approach untaught, nor parallel after teaching. Within certain limits, this savage's intellect is the alertest and the brightest known to history or tradition, and yet the poor creature was never able to invent a counting system that would reach above 5, nor a vessel that he could boil water in. He is the prized curiosity of all the races. To all intents and purposes, he is dead, in the body, but he has features that will live in literature. Mr. Philip Chauncey, an officer of the Victorian government, contributed to its archives a report of his personal observations of the Aboriginals, which has in it some things which I wish to condense slightly and insert here. He speaks of the quickness of their eyes and the accuracy of their judgment of the direction of approaching missiles as being quite extraordinary, and of the answering suppleness and accuracy of limb and muscle in avoiding the missile as being extraordinary also. He has seen an Aboriginal stand as a target for cricket balls thrown with great force 10 or 15 yards by professional bowlers, and successfully dodge them or parry them with his shield during about half an hour. One of those balls, properly placed, could have killed him. Yet he depended, with the utmost self-possession, on the quickness of his eye and his agility. The shield was the customary war shield of his race, and would not be a protection to you or to me. It is no broader than a stovepipe, and is about as long as a man's arm. The opposing surface is not flat, but slopes away from the center line like a boat's bow. The difficulty about a cricket ball that has been thrown with a scientific twist is that it suddenly changes its course when it is close to its target and comes straight for the mark when apparently it was going overhead or to one side. I should not be able to protect myself from such balls for half an hour or less. Mr. Chauncey once saw a little native man throw a cricket ball yards. This is said to beat the English professional record by 13 yards. We have all seen the circus man bound into the air from a springboard and make a somersault over 8 horses standing side by side. Mr. Chauncey saw an Aboriginal do it over 11 and was assured that he had sometimes done it over 14. But what is that to this? I saw the same man leap from the ground, and in going over, he dipped his head, unaided by his hands, into a hat placed in an inverted position on the top of the head of another man sitting upright on horseback, both man and horse being of the average size. The native landed on the other side of the horse with the hat fairly on his head. The prodigious height of the leap, and the precision with which it was taken, so as to enable him to dip his head into the hat, exceeded any feat of the kind I have ever beheld. I should think so. On board a ship lately, I saw a young Oxford athlete run 4 steps and spring into the air and squirm his hips by a side twist over a bar that was 5.5 feet high. But he could not have stood still and cleared a bar that was 4 feet high. I know this because I tried it myself. One can see now where the kangaroo learned its art. Sir George Grey and Mr. Eyre testify that the natives dug wells 14 or 15 feet deep and 2 feet in diameter at the bore, dug them in the sand, wells that were quite circular, carried straight down, and the work beautifully executed. Their tools were their hands and feet. How did they throw sand out from such a depth? How could they stoop down and get it with only 2 feet of space to stoop in? How did they keep that sandpipe from caving in on them? I do not know. Still, they did manage those seeming impossibilities. Swallowed the sand, may be. Mr. Chauncey speaks highly of the patience and skill and alert intelligence of the native huntsman when he is stalking the emu, the kangaroo, and other game. As he walks through the bush, his step is light, elastic, and noiseless. Every track on the earth catches his keen eye. A leaf or fragment of a stick turned, or a blade of grass recently bent by the tread of one of the lower animals, instantly arrests his attention. In fact, nothing escapes his quick and powerful sight on the ground, in the trees, or in the distance, which may supply him with a meal or warn him of danger. A little examination of the trunk of a tree, which may be nearly covered with the scratches of opossums ascending and descending, is sufficient to inform him whether one went up the night before without coming down again or not. Fenimore Cooper lost his chance. He would have known how to value these people. He wouldn't have traded the dullest of them for the brightest mohawk he ever invented. All savages draw outline pictures upon bark, but the resemblances are not close, and expression is usually lacking. But the Australian Aboriginals' pictures of animals were nicely accurate in form, attitude, carriage, and he put spirit into them and expression. And his pictures of white people and natives were pretty nearly as good as his pictures of the other animals. He dressed his whites in the fashion of their day, both the ladies and the gentlemen. As an untaught wielder of the pencil, it is not likely that he has his equal among savage people. His place in art, as to drawing, not color work, is well up, all things considered. His art is not to be classified with savage art at all, but on a plane 2 degrees above it and 1 degree above the lowest plane of civilized art. To be exact, his place in art is between Botticelli and Du Maurier. That is to say, he could not draw as well as Du Maurier, but better than Botticelli. In feeling, he resembles both, also in grouping and in his preferences in the matter of subjects. His corroboree of the Australian wilds reappears in Du Maurier's Belgravian ballrooms, with clothes and the smirk of civilization added. Botticelli's Spring is the corroboree further idealized, but with fewer clothes and more smirk. And well enough as to intention, but my word. The Aboriginal can make a fire by friction. I have tried that. All savages are able to stand a good deal of physical pain. The Australian Aboriginal has this quality in a well-developed degree. Do not read the following instances if horrors are not pleasant to you. They were recorded by the Rev. Henry N. Wollaston, of Melbourne, who had been a surgeon before he became a clergyman. And he proceeded on the journey the next day, as if nothing had happened, and walked 30 miles. It was a strange idea to keep a surgeon and then do his own surgery. But number 3 is my favorite. Whenever I read it, I seemed to enjoy all that the patient enjoyed, whatever it was. But he was a fastidious native. He soon discarded the wooden leg made for him by the doctor, because it had no feeling in it. It must have had as much as the one he burnt off, I should think. So much for the Aboriginals. It is difficult for me to let them alone. They are marvelously interesting creatures. For a quarter of a century now, the several colonial governments have housed their remnants in comfortable stations and fed them well and taken good care of them in every way. If I had found this out while I was in Australia, I could have seen some of those people. But I didn't. I would walk 30 miles to see a stuffed one. Australia has a slang of its own. This is a matter of course. The vast cattle and sheep industries, the strange aspects of the country, and the strange native animals, brute and human, are matters which would naturally breed a local slang. I have notes of this slang somewhere, but at the moment I can call to mind only a few of the words and phrases. They are expressive ones. The wide, sterile, unpeopled deserts have created eloquent phrases like no man's land and the never never country. Also, this felicitous form, she lives in the never never country, that is, she is an old maid. And this one is not without merit. Heifer paddock, young ladies' seminary. Bail up and stick up, equivalent of our highwayman term to hold up a stagecoach or a train. New chum is the equivalent of our tenderfoot, new arrival. And then there is the immortal my word. We must import it. 1000 y word. In cold print, it is the equivalent of our jurarit Caesar. But spoken with the proper Australian unction and fervency, it is worth 6 of it for grace and charm and expressiveness. Our form is rude and explosive. It is not suited to the drawing room or the heifer paddock, but 1000 y word and is music to the ear, too, when the utterer knows how to say it. I saw it in print several times on the Pacific Ocean, but it struck me coldly, it aroused no sympathy. That was because it was the dead corpse of the thing, the soul was not there. The tones were lacking, the informing spirit, the deep feeling, the eloquence. But the first time I heard an Australian say it, it was positively thrilling. Chapter 23. Be careless in your dress if you must, but keep a tidy soul. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. We left Adelaide in due course and went to Horsham in the colony of Victoria. A good deal of a journey, if I remember rightly, but pleasant. Horsham sits in a plain which is as level as a floor. One of those famous dead levels which Australian books describe so often. Grey, bare, somber, melancholy, baked, cracked in the tedious long droughts, but a horizonless ocean of vivid green grass the day after a rain. A country town, peaceful, reposeful, inviting, full of snug homes with garden plots and plenty of shrubbery and flowers. Horsham, October 17. At the hotel, the weather divine. Across the way, in front of the London Bank of Australia, is a very handsome cottonwood. It is in opulent leaf and every leaf perfect. The full power of the onrushing spring is upon it, and I imagine I can see it grow. Alongside the bank and a little way back in the garden, there is a row of soaring fountain sprays of delicate feathery foliage quivering in the breeze, and mottled with flashes of light that shift and play through the mass like flashlights through an opal. A most beautiful tree, and a striking contrast to the cottonwood. Every leaf of the cottonwood is distinctly defined. It is a kodak for faithful, hard, unsentimental detail. The other an impressionist picture, delicious to look upon, full of a subtle and exquisite charm, but all details fused in a swoon of vague and soft loveliness. It turned out upon inquiry to be a pepper tree, an importation from China. It has a silky sheen, soft and rich. I saw some that had long red bunches of currant-like berries ambushed among the foliage. At a distance, in certain lights, they give the tree a pinkish tint and a new charm. There is an agricultural college 8 miles from Horsham. We were driven out to it by its chief. The conveyance was an open wagon, the time, noonday, no wind, the sky without a cloud, the sunshine brilliant, and the mercury at 92°, in the shade. In some countries, an indolent, unsheltered drive of an hour and a half, under such conditions, would have been a sweltering and prostrating experience. But there was nothing of that in this case. It is a climate that is perfect. There was no sense of heat. Indeed, there was no heat. The air was fine and pure and exhilarating. If the drive had lasted half a day, I think we should not have felt any discomfort, or grown silent, or droopy, or tired. Of course, the secret of it was the exceeding dryness of the atmosphere. In that plain 112°. In the shade is without doubt no harder upon a man than is 88 or 90°. In New York. The road lay through the middle of an empty space which seemed to me to be 100 yards wide between the fences. I was not given the width in yards, but only in chains and perches, and furlongs, I think. I would have given a good deal to know what the width was, but I did not pursue the matter. I think it is best to put up with information the way you get it, and seem satisfied with it, and surprised at it, and grateful for it, and say, my word, and never let on. It was a wide space. I could tell you how wide, in chains and perches and furlongs and things, but that would not help you any. Those things sound well, but they are shadowy and indefinite, like troy weight and avoirdupois. Nobody knows what they mean. When you buy a pound of a drug and the man asks you which you want, troy or avoirdupois, it is best to say yes and shift the subject. They said that the wide space dates from the earliest sheep and cattle raising days. People had to drive their stock long distances, immense journeys, from worn-out places to new ones where were water and fresh pasturage. And this wide space had to be left in grass and unfenced, or the stock would have starved to death in the transit. On the way, we saw the usual birds, the beautiful little green parrots, the magpie, and some others, and also the slender native bird of modest plumage and the eternally forgettable name, the bird that is the smartest among birds and can give a parrot 30 to 1 in the game and then talk him to death. I cannot recall that bird's name. I think it begins with M. I wish it began with G or something that a person can remember. The magpie was out in great force, in the fields and on the fences. He is a handsome, large creature, with snowy white decorations, and is a singer. He has a murmurous, rich note that is lovely. He was once modest, even diffident, but he lost all that when he found out that he was Australia's sole musical bird. He has talent and cuteness and impudence, and in his tame state he is a most satisfactory pet, never coming when he is called, always coming when he isn't, and studying disobedience as an accomplishment. He is not confined, but loafs all over the house and grounds, like the laughing jackass. I think he learns to talk, I know he learns to sing tunes, and his friends say that he knows how to steal without learning. I was acquainted with a tame magpie in Melbourne. He had lived in a lady's house several years and believed he owned it. The lady had tamed him, and in return he had tamed the lady. He was always on deck when not wanted, always having his own way, always tyrannizing over the dog, and always making the cat's life a slow sorrow and a martyrdom. He knew a number of tunes and could sing them in perfect time and tune, and would do it, too, at any time that silence was wanted, and then encore himself and do it again. But if he was asked to sing, he would go out and take a walk. It was long believed that fruit trees would not grow in that baked and waterless plain around Horsham, but the agricultural college has dissipated that idea. Its ample nurseries were producing oranges, apricots, lemons, almonds, peaches, cherries, 48 varieties of apples, in fact, all manner of fruits and in abundance. The trees did not seem to miss the water. They were in vigorous and flourishing condition. Experiments are made with different soils to see what things thrive best in them and what climates are best for them. A man who is ignorantly trying to produce upon his farm things not suited to its soil and its other conditions can make a journey to the college from anywhere in Australia and go back with a change of scheme which will make his farm productive and profitable. There were 40 pupils there, a few of them farmers, relearning their trade, the rest young men mainly from the city's novices. It seemed a strange thing that an agricultural college should have an attraction for city-bred youths, but such is the fact. They are good stuff, too. They are above the agricultural average of intelligence, and they come without any inherited prejudices in favor of hoary ignorances made sacred by long descent. The students work all day in the fields, the nurseries, and the shearing sheds, learning and doing all the practical work of the business, 3 days in a week. On the other 3, they study and hear lectures. They are taught the beginnings of such sciences as bear upon agriculture, like chemistry, for instance. We saw the sophomore class in sheep shearing shear a dozen sheep. They did it by hand, not with the machine. The sheep was seized and flung down on his side and held there, and the students took off his coat with great celerity and adroitness. Sometimes they clipped off a sample of the sheep, but that is customary with shearers, and they don't mind it. They don't even mind it as much as the sheep. They dab a splotch of sheep dip on the place and go right ahead. The coat of wool was unbelievably thick. Before the shearing, the sheep looked like the fat woman in the circus. After it, he looked like a bench. He was clipped to the skin, and smoothly and uniformly. The fleece comes from him all in one piece and has the spread of a blanket. The college was flying the Australian flag. The gridiron of England smuggled up in the northwest corner of a big red field that had the random stars of the Southern Cross wandering around over it. From Horsham we went to Stawell. By rail, still in the colony of Victoria, Stawell is in the gold mining country. In the bank safe was half a peck of surface gold, gold dust, grain gold, rich, pure in fact, and pleasant to sift through one's fingers, and would be pleasanter if it would stick. And there were a couple of gold bricks, very heavy to handle and worth $7,500 apiece. They were from a very valuable quartz mine. A lady owns 2/3 of it. She has an income of $75,000 a month from it and is able to keep house. Stawell region is not productive of gold only. It has great vineyards and produces exceptionally fine wines. One of these vineyards, the Great Western, owned by Mr. Irving, is regarded as a model. Its product has reputation abroad. It yields a choice champagne and a fine claret, and its hock took a prize in France 2 or 3 years ago. The champagne is kept in a maze of passages underground, cut in the rock, to secure it an even temperature during the 3-year term required to perfect it. In those vaults I saw 120,000 bottles of champagne. The colony of Victoria has a population of 1 million, and those people are said to drink 25 million bottles of champagne per year. the driest community on the earth. The government has lately reduced the duty upon foreign wines. That is one of the unkindnesses of protection. A man invests years of work and a vast sum of money in a worthy enterprise, upon the faith of existing laws. Then the law is changed, and the man is robbed by his own government. On the way back to Stall, we had a chance to see a group of boulders called the Three Sisters, a curiosity oddly located, for it was upon high ground, with the land sloping away from it, and no height above it from whence the boulders could have rolled down. Relics of an early ice drift, perhaps. They are noble boulders. One of them has the size and smoothness and plump sphericity of a balloon of the biggest pattern. The road led through a forest of great gum trees, lean and scraggy and sorrowful. The road was cream white, a clayey kind of earth, apparently. Along it twirled occasional freight wagons, drawn by long double files of oxen. Those wagons were going a journey of 200 miles, I was told, and were running a successful opposition to the railway. The railways are owned and run by the government. Those sad gums stood up out of the dry white clay, pictures of patience and resignation. It is a tree that can get along without water, still it is fond of it, ravenously so. It is a very intelligent tree, and will detect the presence of hidden water at a distance of 50 feet and send out slender, long root fibers to prospect it. They will find it, and will also get at it even through a cement wall 6 inches thick. Once a cement water pipe underground at Stall began to gradually reduce its output, and finally ceased altogether to deliver water. Upon examining into the matter, it was found stopped up, wadded compactly with a mass of root fibers, delicate and hair-like. How this stuff had gotten into the pipe was a puzzle for some little time. Finally, it was found that it had crept in through a crack that was almost invisible to the eye. A gum tree 40 feet away had tapped the pipe and was drinking the water. Chapter 24. There is no such thing as the Queen's English. The property has gone into the hands of a joint stock company, and we own the bulk of the shares. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. Frequently in Australia, one has cloud effects of an unfamiliar sort. We had this kind of scenery, finely staged, all the way to Ballarat. Consequently, we saw more sky than country on that journey. At one time, a great stretch of the vault was densely flecked with wee ragged-edged flakes of painfully white cloud stuff, all of one shape and size, and equidistant apart, with narrow cracks of adorable blue showing between. The whole was suggestive of a hurricane of snowflakes drifting across the skies. By and by these flakes fused themselves together in interminable lines, with shady faint hollows between the lines, the long satin-surfaced rollers following each other in simulated movement, and enchantingly counterfeiting the majestic march of a flowing sea. Later, the sea solidified itself, then gradually broke up its mass into innumerable lofty white pillars of about one size, and ranged these across the firmament, in receding and fading perspective, in the similitude of a stupendous colonnade. A mirage, without a doubt, flung from the far gates of the hereafter. The approaches to Ballarat were beautiful. The features, great green expanses of rolling pastureland, bisected by lichen-tenting hedges of commingled new gold and old gold gorse, and a lovely lake. One must put in the pause there to fetch the reader up with a slight jolt and keep him from gliding by without noticing the lake. One must notice it, for a lovely lake is not as common a thing along the railways of Australia as are the dry places. 92 in the shade again, but balmy and comfortable, fresh and bracing. A perfect climate. 45 years ago, the site now occupied by the city of Ballarat was a sylvan solitude as quiet as Eden and as lovely. Nobody had ever heard of it. On the 25th of August, 1851, the first great gold strike made in Australia was made here. The wandering prospectors who made it scraped up 2.5 pounds of gold the first day worth $600. A few days later, the place was a hive, a town. The news of the strike spread everywhere in a sort of instantaneous way, spread like a flash to the very ends of the earth. A celebrity so prompt and so universal has hardly been paralleled in history, perhaps. It was as if the name Ballarat had suddenly been written on the sky, where all the world could read it at once. The smaller discoveries made in the colony of New South Wales 3 months before had already started emigrants toward Australia. They had been coming as a stream, but they came as a flood now. 100,000 people poured into Melbourne from England and other countries in a single month, and flocked away to the mines. The crews of the ships that brought them flocked with them. The clerks in the government offices followed. So did the cooks, the maids, the coachmen, the butlers, and the other domestic servants. So did the carpenters, the smiths, the plumbers, the painters, the reporters, the editors, the lawyers, the clients, the barkeepers, the bummers, the blacklegs, the thieves, the loose women, the grocers, the butchers, the bakers, the doctors, the druggists, the nurses, So did the police. Even officials of high and hitherto envied place threw up their positions and joined the procession. This roaring avalanche swept out of Melbourne and left it desolate, Sunday-like, paralyzed, everything at a standstill. The ships lying idle at anchor, all signs of life departed, all sounds stilled save the rasping of the cloud shadows as they scraped across the vacant streets. That grassy and leafy paradise at Ballarat was soon ripped open, and lacerated and scarified and gutted, in the feverish search for its hidden riches. There is nothing like surface mining to snatch the graces and beauties and benignities out of a paradise, and make an odious and repulsive spectacle of it. What fortunes were made, immigrants got rich while the ship unloaded and reloaded and went back home for good in the same cabin they had come out in? Not all of them, only some. I saw the others in Ballarat myself 45 years later, what were left of them by time and death and the disposition to rove. They were young and gay then, they are patriarchal and grave now, and they do not get excited anymore. They talk of the past, they live in it. Their life is a dream, a retrospection. Ballarat was a great region for nuggets. No such nuggets were found in California as Ballarat produced. In fact, the Ballarat region has yielded the largest ones known to history. Two of them weighed about 180 pounds each, and together were worth $90,000. They were offered to any poor person who would shoulder them and carry them away. Gold was so plentiful that it made people liberal like that. Ballarat was a swarming city of tents in the early days. Everybody was happy for a time and apparently prosperous. Then came trouble. The government swooped down with a mining tax. And in its worst form, too, for it was not a tax upon what the miner had taken out, but upon what he was going to take out if he could find it. It was a license tax, license to work his claim, and it had to be paid before he could begin digging. Consider the situation. No business is so uncertain as surface mining. Your claim may be good and it may be worthless. It may make you well off in a month. And then again, you may have to dig and slave for half a year, at heavy expense, only to find out at last that the gold is not there in cost-paying quantity, and that your time and your hard work have been thrown away. It might be wise policy to advance the miner a monthly sum to encourage him to develop the country's riches, but to tax him monthly in advance instead. Why, such a thing was never dreamed of in America. There, neither the claim itself nor its products, howsoever rich or poor, were taxed. The Ballarat miners protested, petitioned, complained. It was of no use. The government held its ground and went on collecting the tax. And not by pleasant methods, but by ways which must have been very galling to free people. The rumblings of a coming storm began to be audible. By and by there was a result, and I think it may be called the finest thing in Australasian history. It was a revolution, small in size but great politically. It was a strike for liberty, a struggle for a principle, a stand against injustice and oppression. It was the Barons and John over again. It was Hampton and Ship Money. It was Concord and Lexington. Small beginnings, all of them, but all of them great in political results, all of them epic-making. It is another instance of a victory won by a lost battle. It adds an honorable page to history. The people know it and are proud of it. They keep green the memory of the men who fell at the Eureka Stockade, and Peter Lalor has his monument. The surface soil of Ballarat was full of gold. This soil the miners ripped and tore and trenched and harried and disemboweled, and made it yield up its immense treasure. Then they went down into the earth with deep shafts, seeking the gravelly beds of ancient rivers and brooks, and found them. They followed the courses of these streams and gutted them, sending the gravel up in buckets to the upper world, and washing out of it its enormous deposits of gold. The next biggest of the two monster nuggets mentioned above came from an old river chan feet underground. Finally, the quartz lodes were attacked. That is not poor man's mining. Quartz mining and milling require capital and staying power and patience. Big companies were formed, and for several decades now, the lodes have been successfully worked and have yielded great wealth. Since the gold discovery in 1853, the Ballarat mines, taking the three kinds of mining together, have contributed to the world's pocket something over $300 million, which is to say that this nearly invisible little spot on the Earth's surface has yielded about one-fourth as much gold in 44 years as all California has yielded in 47. The Californian aggregate, fro to 1895, inclusive, as reported by the statistician of the United States Mint, is $1,265,217,217. A citizen told me a curious thing about those mines. With all my experience of mining, I had never heard of anything of the sort before. The main gold reef runs about north and south, of course, for that is the custom of a rich gold reef. At Ballarat, its course is between walls of slate. Now the citizen told me that throughout a stretch of 12 miles along the reef is crossed at intervals by a straight black streak of a carbonaceous nature, a streak in the slate, a streak no thicker than a pencil, and that wherever it crosses the reef, you will certainly find gold at the junction. It is called the indicator. 30 feet on each side of the indicator, and down in the slate, of course, is a still finer streak, a streak as fine as a pencil mark. And indeed, that is its name, pencil mark. Whenever you find the pencil mark, you know that 30 feet from it is the indicator. You measure the distance, excavate, find the indicator, trace it straight to the reef, and sink your shaft. Your fortune is made for certain. If that is true, it is curious. And it is curious anyway. Ballarat is a town of only 40,000 population, and yet, since it is in Australia, it has every essential of an advanced and enlightened big city. This is pure matter, of course. I must stop dwelling upon these things. It is hard to keep from dwelling upon them, though, for it is difficult to get away from the surprise of it. I will let the other details go this time, but I must allow myself to mention that this little town has a park of 326 acres, a flower garden of 83 acres, with an elaborate and expensive fernery in it and some costly and unusually fine statuary, and an artificial lake covering 600 acres, equipped with a fleet of 200 shells, small sailboats, and little steam yachts. At this point, I strike out some other praiseful things which I was tempted to add. I do not strike them out because they were not true or not well said, but because I find them better said by another man, and a man more competent to testify, too, because he belongs on the ground and knows. I clipped them from a chatty speech delivered some years ago by Mr. William Little, who was at that time mayor of Ballarat. The language of our citizens, in this as in other parts of Australasia, is mostly healthy Anglo-Saxon, free from Americanisms, vulgarisms, and the conflicting dialects of our fatherland, and is pure enough to suit a trench or a Latham. Our youth, aided by climatic influence, are in point of physique and comeliness unsurpassed in the sunny south. Our young men are well ordered, and our maidens, not stepping over the bounds of modesty, are as fair as Psyche is, dispensing smiles as charming as November flowers. The closing clause has the seeming of a rather frosty compliment, but that is apparent only, not real. November is summertime there. His compliment to the local purity of the language is warranted. It is quite free from impurities. This is acknowledged far and wide. As in the German Empire, all cultivated people claim to speak Hanoverian German, so in Australasia, all cultivated people claim to speak Ballarat English. Even in England, this cult has made considerable progress. And now that it is favored by the two great universities, the time is not far away when Ballarat English will come into general use among the educated classes of Great Britain at large. Its great merit is that it is shorter than ordinary English. That is, it is more compressed. At first you have some difficulty in understanding it when it is spoken as rapidly as the orator whom I have quoted speaks it. An illustration will show what I mean. When he called and I handed him a chair, he bowed and said, "Q." Presently, when we were lighting our cigars, he held a match to mine and I said, "Thank you," and he said, "KM." Then I saw, Q is the end of the phrase, "I thank you," KM is the end of the phrase, "You are welcome." Mr. Little puts no emphasis upon either of them, but delivers them so reduced that they hardly have a sound. All Ballarat English is like that, and the effect is very soft and pleasant. It takes all the hardness and harshness out of our tongue, and gives to it a delicate whispery and vanishing cadence, which charms the ear like the faint rustling of the forest leaves. Chapter 25. Classic, a book which people praise and don't read. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. On the rail again, bound for Bendigo, from Diary. October 23. Got up at 6, left at 7:30, soon reached Castlemaine, one of the rich gold fields of the early days, waited several hours for a train, left at 3:40 and reached Bendigo in an hour. For comrade, a Catholic priest who was better than I was but didn't seem to know it. A man full of graces of the heart, the mind, and the spirit. A lovable man. He will rise. He will be a bishop some day, later an archbishop, later a cardinal, finally an archangel, I hope. And then he will recall me when I say, "Do you remember that trip we made from Ballarat to Bendigo when you were nothing but Father C, and I was nothing to what I am now? It has actually taken 9 hours to come from Ballarat to Bendigo. We could have saved 7 by walking, however, there was no hurry." Bendigo was another of the rich strikes of the early days. It does a great quartz mining business. Now, that business which, more than any other that I know of, teaches patience and requires grit and a steady nerve. The town is full of towering chimney stacks and hoisting works and looks like a petroleum city. Speaking of patience, for example, one of the local companies went steadily on with its deep borings and searchings without show of gold or a penny of reward for 11 years, then struck it and became suddenly rich. The 11 years' work had cost $55,000, and the first gold found was a grain the size of a pin's head. It is kept under locks and bars as a precious thing, and is reverently shown to the visitor, hats off. When I saw it, I had not heard its history. It is gold, examine it, take the glass. Now how much should you say it is worth? I said, I should say about 2 cents, or in your English dialect, 4 farthings. Well, it cost £11,000. Oh, come. Yes, it did. Ballarat and Bendigo have produced the three monumental nuggets of the world, and this one is the monumentalist one of the three. The other two represent £9,000 apiece, this one a couple of thousand more. It is small and not much to look at, but it is entitled to its name, Atom. It is the atom nugget of this mine, and its children run up into the millions. Speaking of patience again, another of the mines was worked, under heavy expenses, during 17 years before pay was struck, and still another one compelled a wait of 21 years before pay was struck. Then, in both instances, the outlay was all back in a year or two, with compound interest. Bendigo has turned out even more gold than Ballarat. The two together have produced $650 million worth, which is half as much as California produced. It was through Mr. Blank, not to go into particulars about his name, it was mainly through Mr. Blank that my stay in Bendigo was made memorably pleasant and interesting. He explained this to me himself. He told me that it was through his influence that the city government invited me to the town hall to hear complimentary speeches and respond to them. That it was through his influence that I had been taken on a long pleasure drive through the city and shown its notable features. That it was through his influence that I was invited to visit the great mines. That it was through his influence that I was taken to the hospital and allowed to see the convalescent Chinaman who had been attacked at midnight in his lonely hut 8 weeks before by robbers, and stabbed 46 times and scalped besides. That it was through his influence that, when I arrived, this awful spectacle of piecings and patchings and bandagings was sitting up in his cot, letting on to read one of my books. That it was through his influence that efforts had been made to get the Catholic Archbishop of Bendigo to invite me to dinner. That it was through his influence that efforts had been made to get the Anglican Bishop of Bendigo to ask me to supper. That it was through his influence that the dean of the editorial fraternity had driven me through the woodsy outlying country and shown me, from the summit of Lone Tree Hill, the mightiest and loveliest expanse of forest-clad mountain and valley that I had seen in all Australia. And when he asked me what had most impressed me in Bendigo, and I answered, and said it was the taste and the public spirit which had adorned the streets with 105 miles of shade trees, he said that it was through his influence that it had been done. But I am not representing him quite correctly. He did not say it was through his influence that all these things had happened, for that would have been coarse. He merely conveyed that idea, conveyed it so subtly that I only caught it fleetingly, as one catches vagrant faint breaths of perfume when one traverses the meadows in summer, conveyed it without offense and without any suggestion of egoism or ostentation, but conveyed it nevertheless. He was an Irishman, an educated gentleman, grave and kindly and courteous, a bachelor, and about 45 or possibly 50 years old, apparently. He called upon me at the hotel, and it was there that we had this talk. He made me like him and did it without trouble. This was partly through his winning and gentle ways, but mainly through the amazing familiarity with my books which his conversation showed. He was down to date with them, too, and if he had made them the study of his life, he could hardly have been better posted as to their contents than he was. He made me better satisfied with myself than I had ever been before. It was plain that he had a deep fondness for humor, yet he never laughed, he never even chuckled. In fact, humor could not win to outward expression on his face at all. No, he was always grave, tenderly, pensively grave, but he made me laugh all along, and this was very trying and very pleasant at the same time, for it was at quotations from my own books. When he was going, he turned and said, "You don't remember me." Why no, have we met before? No, it was a matter of correspondence. Correspondence? Yes, many years ago, 12 or 15. Oh, longer than that, but of course you? A musing pause, then he said, "Do you remember Corrigan Castle?" And no, I believe I don't. I don't seem to recall the name. He waited a moment, pondering, with the doorknob in his hand, then started out, but turned back and said that I had once been interested in Corrigan Castle and asked me if I would go with him to his quarters in the evening and take a hot scotch and talk it over. I was a teetotaler and liked relaxation, so I said I would. We drove from the lecture hall together about 10:30. He had a most comfortably and tastefully furnished parlor, with good pictures on the walls, Indian and Japanese ornaments on the mantel, and here and there and books everywhere, largely mine, which made me proud. The light was brilliant, the easy chairs were deep cushioned, the arrangements for brewing and smoking were all there. We brewed and lit up. Then he passed a sheet of note paper to me and said,